Well, I just had my annual physical, and the results were wow. Well, I've mentioned before that I come from really good genes. My grandparents and my parents all lived in well into their 80s and 90s, and a pretty healthy bunch, all in all. And I've probably mentioned before that I don't smoke and I don't drink and don't carouse too much. But the truth is, I'm an ex-smoker and an ex-drinker. So it's been a while. It's been a while for both of those. I get some regular exercise. I try and do the right things. I've mentioned a number of times that I walk every morning, a couple of miles every morning. Don't miss too many of them. And I try and keep my weight at a reasonable level. I'm up a few pounds now, but I'm working on it. I told the doctor. I said my weight peaked about 6 weeks or so ago, and I'm down a couple of pounds from there. So I'm headed in the right direction. I do have to make a confession though that I do love my snacks. I've got a terrible sweet tooth, and I love the salty crunchy too. That's a struggle for me, especially in the evenings. But like I said, I'm working on it. It's been a long time since I've skipped an annual physical. Ever since I was in the service, when I got out of the service, I I kept up with my annual physicals. I've had really good doctors. I was involved with the VA system for a while. That's the Veterans Administration here in the United States, and they provide medical care for veterans. And when I left my job and moved to the UP, I hooked up with the local VA medical facility there. It's called an outreach facility, and I had my annual physicals there. But I always get an annual physical. Always have. Always will. In my case, it proved the right thing to do. A few years ago, when I was living in Wisconsin, I had a regular personal physician, general practitioner, whatever you want to call him, and he was keeping an eye on my PSA numbers, and they were rising, rising slowly, but rising nonetheless. And at my annual physical, he decided that it was time to take a look at what was going on. It had reached that level. So he recommended a urologist, and I went to see the urologist, and I had the biopsy, and it turned out to be prostate cancer. I had the surgery, had the prostate removed, successfully removed, and I get my annual checkups. Of course, there are how do I want to say it? There are more frequent checkups after the surgery. Just make sure everything was copacetic. I'm back to annual checkups now because everything has been perfectly fine since then. But I figured if I hadn't been doing my annual checkups, my annual physicals, the PSA probably wouldn't have been caught. And who knows what might have happened otherwise. So I'm a big fan of annual physicals. And I also do annual eye checkups and dental checkups. Actually, my dental checkups are biannual, twice a year. Is that biannual? Anyway, twice every 6 months, dental, and then once a year on the eye checkups. I'm a big proponent of that. I like to think I'm reasonable about aging. I'm not unrealistic about what to expect at 76. I've got aches and pains like everybody else. I had back surgery 35 years ago, and that's catching up with me a little bit the older I get. I've got a shoulder that acts up from time to time. 6 months or so ago, it was not in very good shape, so I went to the doc, and he looked it over and said, well, I can inject, or I can do this, or I can do that. He said, shoulders take a long time to heal if you do something to them. So I said, well, let's wait a little bit and see what happens. I'm not one for interventions if it might not be necessary, put it that way. So I waited, and I favored it for a while, like you do when you have a pain. And it's gotten better, gotten much better, in fact, without any injections or any therapies or anything else. So other than being careful with it. So I'm thankful for that. It's not 100%. It's never going to be 100%. I can't sleep on my right side very easily anymore. Yeah, small price. And like everybody else, I've got random aches and pains. You know, my knees get a little tweak in my knee from time to time, or my hip. They come and they go. You know how it is. I don't jump out of bed anymore in the morning. I more roll out of bed. When I stand up, I hang on to the windowsill or the bedpost. You know, 76. I don't expect to jump out of bed anymore. As much as I'd like to, I don't expect to. And I don't take any prescription medicine at all. I take a few over the counter meds. I take ibuprofen every day to help feel a little a little less like I'm 76. But anyway, this past annual checkup was straight A's, as Kathy likes to say. All of my numbers, all of my lab numbers were within the range, not a single red flag. Everything was in the green. So I'm exceedingly fortunate. And my PSA number is still good too. So good for another year, hopefully. Well, like I said, I still have a couple of pounds to lose, but I'm working on it. And my doctor's advice at my annual physical was to keep doing what I'm doing. Not bad. And I don't say that to brag. I am extremely fortunate and thankful. So for my money, if you can call it advice if you want, or my opinion, if you're considering that annual physical, or whether you need it or whether you should bother, get her done. Do it. You never know what you might catch that will be beneficial in the long run. So my advice, which I don't give very often, is get your get your annual physical. It's a good thing. So until next time, live long and prosper. No, wait, that's not right. Peace and joy, y'all.